Back on the MSG 150 at home, presented by Chase, Bill Pito, Alan Hahn, and Wally Zerbiak. And look who it is. It's Alan's radio partner on ESPN Radio, 1 to 3, Bart Scott. And Bart, it's so great to see you. What do you guys got? What do you got going there, Bart?
You got a lot of hair going.
Yeah, well, you know, we got that pandemic hair. You know what I mean? We've been growing it out. It looks like Alan shaped it up a little bit. Wally always looks clean, man. I'm just trying to do my part. My juice and berries this early in the morning ain't activated yet.
All right, here's the most important question of all. We all work with Alan. We love Alan. You work with Alan. Are you able to get any airtime working with Alan? That's the key question.
Well, I can get a word in on any subject outside of basketball. Sure. You know, he kind of gets passionate. Sometimes he's kind of raining on the parade. We have to hit the thunder button for him. But other than that, he'll let it breathe a little bit for me.
Interesting, Alan. So you give Bart more airtime than you give the rest of us? Is that what the story is, or what?
Yeah, well, Bart has plenty of good things to say. So
okay.
Oh, easy there, partner. Easy.
He told me once about basketball, I unleash. And that's where, Wally, you come in. You know, all we do together is talk basketball. So that's why sometimes I have to cut you off every now and then.
All right, well, let's begin the conversation here, Bart, with football. What do you think about what ultimately is going to happen here with the NFL?
I mean, this is interesting. I think it's an open case study. I think the NFL and the NFLPA are trying to kind of slow play this a little bit because they're seeing the COVID, outbreaks all over the country. And also, I think what they're really paying close attention to is they're paying close attention to the collegiate sports and how they're going to respond. I think if I had to take my crystal ball and say, do we have football this year? I say yes because of the economics of it. But do we have it on a regular schedule like they've been, trying to allude and try and tell us that they're going to, everything is fine? I don't think so. I think that the NFLPA and you're starting to see things starting to creep up. It's going to get pushed back maybe to October as teams are trying to figure out how do you socially distance in a sport that has more contact than any other sport, with more players than any other sport other than outside of college football. So do we have football this year? Yes. Do we have it on as our regularly scheduled, programming? I don't think so. I think it starts in October.
As far as this year for you, let's just separate these two guys, the Joes, and let's talk a little pro talk here. If you were still playing right now and you were in this situation.
Wait, what did he just call us?
Joes.
You're the Joes. You're the Joes, all right? We're the pros.
You can dodge the ball, you can dodge the wrench.
Zip it over there, Bill. Zip it. If you were still playing, Bart, and you were in a situation where, what would your feelings be as far as going back to playing this season? Because obviously it's going to be a tremendous sacrifice and not ordinary life, so to speak, as the athlete that we used to remember life was like.
Well, for me, I've been on both sides of it, Wally. I came in as an undrafted free agent, but then I still was at one point the highest paid linebacker in NFL. So I understand the pressure from the guys that are supposed to lead because they're making all the monetary, all the money. But also understand how difficult a decision it is for the guys that's coming in undrafted, that maybe just started a family, that maybe have to pay a mortgage, that maybe they may not see that second contract. So it depends. I mean, I feel in any sense I would have to play, not so much for myself, but for, my teammates to be able to make a living. Because football has the shortest life expectancy when you talk about sports. And guys only have a small window to make money. And if you tell a player, that they're not going to get paid for 18 months, how many of these guys lose their homes? How many of those guys, parents lose their homes because they're paying those mortgages? We saw when we had the lockout that guys were dipping into the relief fund within the first couple of months. So people always assume that athletes can go for a long time without getting a check, but you plan for those checks. And 18 months, I just don't know if a lot of guys will survive. So I would be all in just to make sure that my brothers were good as well. And if I had to socially distance and be able to be without my family for a couple of months, I think that's a small sacrifice because at the end of the day, any play in football outside of, I think, any other sport can be your last, your one play can be your last play in the sport because it's a physical sport where it's 100% injury rate.
I love it.
So we're seeing sports that are going to have empty stadiums. We're going to see, obviously, basketball, hockey, you're not going to have people in the arena. Baseball, the same thing. The NFL's talked about allowing fans to sign a waiver to come into the stadium because, again, it's always about the almighty dollar. But I've talked to you about this, and I'm curious. So it's not going to be a packed 80,000 seat stadium, though. You're still going to have a smaller crowd in that big stadium. Does that benefit the defense a little bit? Because we always see the quarterbacks trying to keep the crowd quiet, whereas the defense, obviously for them, they want to quiet. I should say it should benefit the offense more than the defense. And how much will trash talking be heard because there won't be crowds there?
Well, I would hope that they would have like a whole sub show where they mic people up. They used to have it before, but they stopped kind of micing guys up as much. I wish, you think about the young cut version of what we saw from The Last Dance, how much people enjoyed the real conversations that happened. I feel like maybe they should have it on a different channel, and maybe for the night games, be able to have guys mic'd up where you can have those open conversations so you can hear the trash talk, so you can hear the game within the game, you can hear the communications, between players, the infighting between linemen fighting, and, the bending of the fingers, the eye gouge, you know what I mean? Sometimes the crotch grab. You know what I mean? Understanding like really what happens, because we're going to have to offer our viewers more than what they're going to get, because they're not going to get a sense of the atmosphere. But as a defensive player, as the home team, it hurts me too, right? Because when you're at home, you're hoping that your crowd is being able to make it difficult for the opposing quarterback to hear, which allows me to get off on my count because they have to go with generic type of cadence. So it kind of flip-flops where like your offense is going to be good, but then your defense isn't going to be as good as far as the home team. So it's going to be advantages. People are going to have to figure out the advantages. But I think it's an opportunity for the NFL, much like MMA, to be able to hear like the trash talk, but also the counters to the counter. And the fact that it's not going to be crowd noise is going to allow also the defenders to hear the cadence, to hear the checks that the quarterback is making, so that we can understand what certain checks mean. It's going to put a lot of pressure on the offense to make sure that they switch those cadence up, maybe from one quarter to the next. I remember going against Peyton Manning, and what yellow meant in the first half the yellow didn't mean that in the second half. So he used your football acumen against you. So I think that's going to be the game within the game, and I think it should be someone there to point it out. Tony Romo always wants to predict. Maybe he can predict, the chess matches that are going on in between the game.
That was a Hahn-esque answer. I think Alan Hahn is wearing off on you, Bart.
Oh, absolutely.
Great detail, great information. That's what it's about, Bart. Don't let him bully you.
Bart, if and when the NFL is able to play, the big story, of course, concerns the Patriots with Tom Brady in Tampa Bay and Bill Belichick just signing Cam Newton. What do you think is going to be the net impact on that team?
I think it's going to be instant. Not only is it going to help the passing game, but it's going to help the running game as well. Tom Brady never affected the running game. So now teams were able to understand you were able to cheat against Tom Brady, even though he was super successful. Just imagine if you weren't allowed to cheat, because you understood that he wasn't going to do a lot of boots, because he never wanted to turn his back to the defense. But also, you also cheated as well as far as being that backside defensive end, because you flattened out on runs away because you knew that Tom wasn't going to keep it and run ever. With Cam Newton, he's going to be able to affect the backside linebacker and also the backside defensive end, which is going to create cutback lanes for the running backs, because they're much like Michael Vick. They're going to make sure that they have to be responsible if he keeps it or if he's on a boot. So then what happens is it allows you to wash down the backside of the offensive line, which creates natural cutback lanes, because the linebacker from the backside can't flow super fast to the front side. Well, when he does that, that allows that lineman to work up to him to create what we call, Mayor Hodges used to call a seal here and a seal there. And that's basically because of the respect for Cam Newton. And also, we've seen Nick Foles and all these guys really control football games and have tremendous success because of the RPO game, without ever really being a real threat to run. Cam Newton is probably one of the most accomplished runners of the football outside of maybe Michael Vick and Lamar Jackson. Now, are they going to expose him as much? No, but the fact that Josh McDaniels is going to have that in his toolbox is going to make it so much more difficult for you to defend the Patriots than it used to be. So it's going to add a different element that now you have to prepare for. And he still has a great arm down the field, and they have huge receivers with huge catch radiuses, like Cam is accustomed to, having Devin Funches and having bigger receivers in Carolina, where he can throw it in an area and his guys have the catch radius to make the play.
Now, Bart, I'm curious because obviously I know the schedule of an NBA player. Go to practice at 10 o'clock, done at 2. You got a whole entire day to kind of get rest, hang with your family, do whatever you want. But what's the weekly, day-to-day schedule for an NFL player and team? Don't they go to practice till almost 5 o'clock? So feasibly, you just have to quarantine them for the night, keep them in a hotel, some sort of situation like that. And then the travel isn't as bad as most sports. You only travel really 8 times a year to go on road games. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, well, the problem is how do you socially distance, right? And how do you keep these guys away from each other? And when they go into the meeting rooms, how do you keep them separate? I think that the NFL should have the full complement of your roster on game day. But you're going to have a couple players in which you're going to have to put in separate meeting rooms, because if you have an outbreak in one position, then how do you play? Like basketball is like positionless, right? So if a guy's down, if you're out of forwards, maybe, or power forwards, maybe you move your center to, bring in an extra big man for you to kind of help you out. If you're out of linebackers, there's nobody else that can play linebacker. So how do you have 1 or 2 guys as emergency linebackers that you can put in a different room that can have meetings, but they're not exposed to the rest? And, we wake up and we get there like 5, 6 o'clock, but then everybody has lifting groups. Well, how are you going to continue to be able to continue to sanitize? Because we lift weights every single day. And you're talking about 53 players. You're talking about putting 23, 25. Our weight rooms aren't as huge as college weight rooms because we don't have the bodies, so they don't build them that big. So how do you keep those guys away from each other and also try and keep them away from coaches, which most of these coaches, you have a lot of senior and older coaches as well. So it's going to be hard because it's always been like outbreaks of the flu within football, because we're leaning on each other, we're breathing on each other, we're sweating on each other constantly. And where we don't maybe have the travel time, we spend so much more time in confined areas with each other. If I'm a head coach, I don't have team meetings. I have Zoom team meetings where I may be in the team meeting room, but everybody else is in their respective, linebacker, receivers rooms, and then I'm coming through on their screens there, because you don't want to put all 53 together because they can affect or they can contaminate each other.
It's going to be just a trial by error, like all the different sports are going to be. While you're going through it, you're figuring it out and making adjustments as you go. Now, Bart, I got to bring up the fact that you are a Saluki. You're from Southern. You played in Southern Illinois. We got to bring that up because obviously, I mean, no offense to you, the most famous alum from Southern Illinois.
That is true.
Well, Clyde Frazier, that's your guy. Now, from a football player's perspective, when you were there, tell us what that perspective of the legend of Clyde is.
Well, you see him, he's on the Wall of Fame. Everybody knows he was the most famous Saluki. I may not even be the most famous football player. Jim Hart may be the most famous football player. I may be like slightly underneath that. And, for New York fans, even though he was only there for 1 year, they say, well, he won a Super Bowl, so they might give it to Brandon Jacobs. But it's all good. I want to say that I was first. I opened the door for those type of guys as far as Brandon Jacobs. But, Clyde was the man, you know what I mean? And he was the one that was kind of carrying that mantle. When people asked, what is a Saluki? They knew, because they knew where he came from. And they knew that, he was, a Hall of Fame player. So he's the only guy in the Hall of Fame out of all the guys that ever played there. So he's the GOAT, and he'll remain the GOAT, and he dresses like the GOAT.
Bart, before we let you go, if you were running the Jets right now, how would you handle the Jamal Adams situation?
I mean, you just talk to the young man. You can't pay attention to the noise. You can't succumb to the pressure. I mean, he's a player that you have under control for a while. Winning cures all. I don't think that the Jets are going to win this year, but maybe they can make some moves and convince him that, hey, we're going to take care of you. What they can't do is open up Pandora's box. You can't open up Pandora's box and pay him early, because then because you've been so bad for the last 5-6 years, you've been picking in the top 10. So if him at the number 6 pick, you pay him early, who's to say you're not going to have to pay, Quentin Williams early, or you're not going to have to pay Sam Darnold early, or you're not going to have to pay Mekhi Becton early. So you can't set that type of precedent for player, because you have players that you think are going to be able to be successful as well. But if you get the right trade opportunity, I mean, I think that you have to take a close listen, because if he's going to be the squeaky wheel and he's not going to be cooperative, it may be an opportunity if you can get Mika Fitzpatrick type of deal. If you can get a Khalil Mack type of deal, if somebody wants to or Laramie Tunsil, where you can get 2 number ones, you have to understand the value at a safety and the impact of a safety on the team, no matter how great they are, isn't as great as a pass rusher, isn't as effective as a lockdown corner, because they allow you to do things that a lockdown safety doesn't allow you to do.
Okay. Hey, Bart, we'll leave it there. It is so great to have you on. Thanks so much. And best of luck with Han on the radio.
I appreciate it. My juice and berries will be alive and moisturized properly when it comes time for my show. You believe that, Alan. Don't worry about it.
It's a good thing it's radio, my man.
All right, Bart, we'll see you soon. Up next, we will tip off Patrick Ewing Week, and we'll do that right after this on the MSG 150 at Home, presented by Chase.